With the 2025 Drivers and Constructors titles wrapped up, there's one championship that teams absolutely do not want, and that is the Destructors Championship. And while it is unofficial, it is calculated throughout the whole season, and if you're finishing in the Drivers and Constructors standing already wasn't good, this just adds an additional screw you to pretty much the end of the season. And while the 2024 season was definitely expensive and Williams just dominated the Destructors, this year it's been much closer and still just as expensive, but a bit more balanced out than it was in the previous season. We've had a lot of rookie crashes this year, and that's made up a big amount in the total. But let's go over it. Let's talk about the cars in general, how much each part is worth, and how many have been destroyed in the season. If you're new here, go ahead and subscribe. We're at the finish line. Thank you all so much. It means the world. Let's get started. As I stated, it's been a very expensive season, and the drivers have accumulated pretty big numbers going from top to bottom. It's not been a flawless season like in 24 where Pierre Gasly supposedly had no damage, but later on we ended up catching that he had damage in a couple of parts. This season, nobody's been flawless, but some drivers have been pretty close to it. If we look at the component costs of Formula 1 cars, the front wing at $125,000, these are estimates looking at them. It's a total estimate of $1.3 million, and the gearbox being the most cost-worthy. This has always been the case. But with that, the gearbox very rarely gets destroyed. It requires a very big crash. And while I didn't include the chassis, that's worth somewhere near $1 million to $1.5 million. That's the biggest, most expensive component. But here, looking at the unit price and looking at the quantity of the amount that have been broken, front wings 63, wheels being the most at 74. And only 2 gearboxes have been broken in the season, just accumulating that to $1 million. And most of the cost coming from the front wings, but a total estimated of $30 million in damage. Which is pretty crazy to think, because we didn't have too many huge incidents like we had in 24, but it's piled up through the season. And with the cars also being so hard to follow, we didn't have too many overtakes and too many on-track battles. But what that did require for some drivers was to dive bomb or go for very ambitious moves. Sometimes that resulted in a big incident.
But Lando Norris gets the run that he needs, and it's a lockup for Kimi, Andrea Antonelli, and he's hit Max Verstappen.
Now taking a look at the 21 drivers that have participated in our Destructors Championship, looking at the under 1 million. And here we have Fernando Alonso, Kimi Antonelli, Esteban Ocon, George Russell, and Max Verstappen. Probably the cleanest drivers on the grid. Shocking to see Ocon here, to say the least. But it's very telling that the Mercedes drivers have been talked about. There's plenty of memes out there about them being the most crash prone, and generally just the drivers that are always in incidents. They were towards the bottom 5 to say the least. Max Verstappen, who had the best season in 2025, has the least amount of damage, just showing the talent on this guy. Very little damage, fighting for the championship in an inferior car for most of the season. Just impressive to say the least. And to me, it's a pretty big statement to be in the bottom 5. Shows how good of a driver you are, but also how clean and how important it is to have drivers like this for a team. Because the less damage you cause in the season, the better the next season can be, and during the season bringing upgraded parts, how reliable you are, and in general, your marketability to other teams as well. With that, we're going to make our way into the 1 to 2 million, and this is definitely more drivers here. I would say at this point, it's getting a bit too much, but you're not having the most crash-prone season. Isaac Hadjar leads the way with almost 2 million at 1.9. And Nico is at the bottom with the least amount, getting very close to that 1 million mark. He still had a pretty clean season. As you can see, we have Hadjar, Colapinto, Lawson, and Behrman, who are all very new drivers, and they've each racked up a pretty decent amount. Hadjar racked it up in Silverstone, which really wasn't his fault in that incident. Australia wasn't great either. He did damage a pretty decent amount in the car. Colapinto, very crash heavy. In his first session in Imola, that's where he got a pretty big crash and broke a lot of the car. Lawson accumulated this mainly through the season in little parts. It wasn't just one huge crash. And Ali, shockingly enough, if any of you guys remember, that Australian GP weekend was just awful from his end. And he was just crash happy the whole weekend. That's where he accumulated a big chunk of his crashes, over $1 million. So he's done a pretty good job for the rest of the season. Carlos was pretty crash happy, and if you looked somewhere in the mid-season of the Destructors, Carlos was one of the leading drivers. That didn't end up happening towards the end, which is good. But like I said, I don't think these drivers have necessarily had the most crash happy season. The drivers over 2 million, yeah, that's pretty bad. And looking at the 2 million, you have the leader, Gabriele Bortoleto, with almost 4 million. And a lot of this was accumulated towards the end. He was very clean, had a great season, and it's still a pretty decent season. But that crash in Vegas, where he pretty much forgot to brake and went for a move that looked like something you would do in iRacing when somebody pisses you off, that led up to a lot of money, but Brazil in particular was just too much damage to the car in the sprint race, going for a very ambitious move towards the end for like a P12 or P13. Jack Doohan accumulated over 2 million in only 5 GPs. That Japan incident was very cost-worthy when you keep the DRS open going into a corner. Now, the other crazy contenders are Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, and Charles Leclerc. Now, Leclerc was driving an oversteery and understeery, slow, very, let's just say, weird Ferrari car, so I can justify maybe 2.2 million. It's still not great, but Oscar and Lando driving the most dominant car, Lando getting closer to 3 million with a big Saudi crash, and Oscar just having that horrible Baku weekend and making up most of his money there. I mean, this ain't good. It's cost-worthy, but they did win the constructor, so they'll make the money back. They still did a great job. And then, of course, Yuki Tsunoda with the 3.5 million approximately had a very big crash in Imola in qualifying. That did cost the team a lot of money. Now, that's not it for the drivers, but looking at the team standings, because it's very hard to tell, and it's been very mixed. The veteran drivers didn't really cost the team much, but the rookie drivers definitely piled up on the bill. But going from 10th to 1st, as I said, Mercedes has been made fun of all season. Their drivers, they've had the least amount of money spent in the Destructors, so you got to give them props there. And Alpine, 10th in the Constructors, pretty much dead last in the drivers, Colapinto scoring no points, and leading the Destructors Championship. I mean, they had the grand slam of what you don't want to do in 2025. But hopefully that turns around. New engine, new car. They've been talking a lot about 26. They're going to need it. McLaren was very close. Same with Kick Sauber. A lot of that was made up by Bortoleto. And Red Bull was pretty much all made up by Yuki Tsunoda. And I really think in the next season in 2026, with these cars being so new, difficult to drive, and the learning curve being very high, we could see this go even higher, maybe even in the 50 million mark, which would be pretty much a record. It's definitely been a way different season in the Destructors in comparison to the previous. 24 was more on one team, where Williams was pretty much at 10 million. But this year, nobody got even close to that mark. Just made up of some big crashes, but mainly minor little incidents of the front wing and so on. But if we look at the least most expensive crash, now that might not make sense to you, but Nico Hülkenberg in Brazil only got up to 217,000, which is still a lot of money. But out of all 21 drivers, their most expensive crash, this one cost the least. So he ended up getting 21stness. And now looking at the most expensive crash this season, it was Gabriele Bortoleto. You probably could have guessed this at the beginning of the video. That crash in the Brazil sprint race. So both incidents happened in Brazil, both at Kick Sauber, but completely different ends. So while we didn't get a lot of overtaking, we definitely had a decent amount of crashes, which does make the sport entertaining as long as it's safe and the drivers are okay. But it's a part of Formula One and will always be part of the sport. They're pushing to the limit. Sometimes things like this happen. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Did you guys think the numbers were going to be this high? Who do you think was going to be at the top? Comment down below. Thank you all for coming by. Please leave a like, subscribe, it'd mean the world, and peace.